If you're an ultra-wide enjoyer, well, the day you've been waiting for is finally here because yes, we do have our hands on the first ever true 4K ultra-wide OLED display. This means, yes, you're getting a total of 5120 by 2160 pixels, an enormous increase over the current essentially 1440p options on the market. And this also means not only is everything going to be far more detailed with this brand new OLED 45GX950A from LG, but it also means you're getting way more real estate, especially vertically, which is going to help you play your games much better and immerse you in them far more than any 1440p one on the market. But coming in at an insane $2,000, is this really worth the price? I mean, this is gonna have to be the absolute king of ultrawides for it to be worth picking up. And I'll tell you guys right now, the answer to that question is yes, it is. This is, without question, the best ultrawide monitor that you can buy today. And if that's all you wanted to hear, hey, I'll have affiliate links in the description below so you can go ahead and pick one up. But this monitor is by no means perfect. So if you want to learn every detail about this monitor before making such a large purchase, and I recommend you do, then stay tuned because I'm going to be spreading this monitor's cheeks and taking a very, very deep dive. Let's get into it. So real quick, before we jump into the testing, this does actually come with the brand new MLA RGWB subpixel arranged OLED panel from LG, which means that the text clarity should be a little bit better. This is also going to come with 165/330 hertz for its refresh rate, depending on the resolution that you choose. So it should be very clear in motion. It also comes with an alleged response time of 0.03 milliseconds, G-Sync and FreeSync support, and DisplayHDR True Black 400. In terms of the overall design, it's not too gamer-esque, I guess you could say, and I think this should fit in most environments. It does also come with a stand, which does everything you'd expect it to, as well as standard 100x100 VESA mount compatibility. And in terms of the ports, pause if you need to, but I do want to harp on the DisplayPort 2.1 because it comes with one, but don't be fooled. This is not full bandwidth. It is 54 gigabit per second, which means 4K 165 hertz will still require display stream compression. This is a cheap out from LG that is totally ridiculous, but it does also come with two HDMI 2.1s that you can use as well. And while it does come in at $1,999.99, it does come with a 2-year parts and labor warranty to make you feel a little bit better about that purchase. But enough about the details, let's get into the testing, and let's start off with the color. And if you want the long and short of it, go ahead and skip to the end of this section. But for those display enthusiasts out there, let's get into those Calman results right away. In SDR out of the box, it's pretty good, but unfortunately it does stretch the colors. This can be quickly fixed in the menu, and I'll have the best settings for this display in my Patreon in the description below, which also gets you access to the Discord Ask Me Questions and is the best way to support this channel. And even in the color checker, it does fairly well. It does have an average delta E of less than 2, which is what I'd like to see, meaning you're unlikely to notice any major color inaccuracies. Now jumping into HDR, it's a totally different subject. Out of the box, you can see here, it does have some under tracking issues on the EOTF curve. If you under track, it's not going to be bright enough. If you go over that yellow line, it could be blowing out highlight details. So that is unfortunate to see there. And even in the 6 different modes that I tested, every single one of them had some sort of an issue. Unfortunately, in the color test, it's visibly inaccurate. Also, in terms of the HDR 2020 gamut coverage, it's pretty decent with over 70%. However, it is far below the 80% plus that you can see out of some QD OLED. So what do I think of the color overall? Well, for SDR gaming and even maybe some light editing, it's actually pretty dang good. However, in HDR, it does have some inaccuracies and some issues. Things are going to look a little bit washed out when compared to QD OLED, especially in high brightness HDR games, but it's not going to be something that's going to, I'd say, put off gamers from buying the display, as it's certainly good enough to use for that. But let's talk about now the brightness. This is the most exciting part, fellas, because HDR impact is all about brightness. And fortunately, this display does pretty good. So if you take a look here, it's actually the second brightest display that I have tested, aside from TVs. And I did include one TV here just to give you some perspective. Last year's 55-inch LG G4 is still absolutely manhandling this OLED monitor. I mean, we're talking about roughly twice as bright, but with 820 nits in a 10% window and over 300 nits, 302 to be exact, in a 100% window. This is a very respectable result out of an OLED display and is currently the brightest I've ever measured out of a monitor. But what about a real scene? Well, taking a look at Baldur's Gate 3 at the D65 white point, it does still do pretty good, but it falls a little bit further behind. Now it's actually going to be the fourth brightest that I've measured. The power limiting or whatever limiting that's going on here is in full effect because that 55-inch LG G4 OLED TV is now, we're probably talking closer to 3 times brighter than this monitor. So while it is good for a monitor, don't expect it to be competing with TVs. They're still way behind. This does also mean is that in a dark room, because OLED has infinite contrast and every single pixel can go to absolute 0, well, reaching upwards of nearly 1,000 nits, or actually beyond that in very small windows, I think I actually saw over 1,500 nits in a very tiny highlight, means that you can still get really excellent contrast, again, in a light-controlled room where OLED excels. But what about the gaming? I mean, is this a fast display that you can use for online competitive gaming? And the answer is yes. This is actually roughly the 3rd fastest display that I have ever measured. Now, to be fair, this is in the lower resolution 330 hertz mode, which is going to be more like 1080p, but this can be accessed simply by the touch of a button and will give you faster response times as well as lower input latency. But speaking of the response times, take a look here. I mean, because OLED has near instantaneous response times, you do actually get, especially in the 330 hertz mode, a nearly crystal clear image in motion. I mean, this is just behind the 480 hertz OLED that LG has, which is honestly almost perfect. And even in the 165 hertz mode, yes, there is some definite blur to it, but this is miles better than any LCD or mini LED on the market today, and is going to be very good for online competitive gaming. For those games out there that do support ultra wide, it's a great option. Super low latency, super fast in motion. It's really nearly unbeatable in that area. However, speaking of features, I do want to talk about ultra wide in and of itself, because ultrawide, despite what you've heard, still does have some issues. I know some people say pretty much all games support ultrawide these days, and they're not wrong, they do. However, that support is the bare minimum in my experience. A lot of games out there today still do have a lot of field of view stretching, and instead of getting, let's say, 30 degrees more field of view by going from 16:9 to ultrawide, you might only get like 5 degrees more field of view, and then it just stretches the rest out. So keep in mind, do check to see if your games have good ultrawide support before you spend a ton of money on this display, because it is going to come at a cost, both in terms of, $2,000, as well as an enormous increase in GPU requirements to get this monitor running at 165 hertz 4K ultrawide. It's a lot more than regular 4K. In fact, I think you can kind of get away with like a 5070 or something similar to that from AMD or previous generations with regular 4K at, say, 144, 165 hertz. But at ultrawide 4K, the 5070 that I was testing this on was really struggling in a couple of games, and you may actually want something more like a 5080, 4090, 5090, especially if you're going to be playing AAA games that are very difficult to run. But now let's talk about the text clarity in the subpixel layout. So the text clarity is, in my opinion, marginally improved with this new RGBB subpixel arrangement, because it is red, green, blue. That's what Windows expects, but there is still the white in there, and that is still going to mess it up. So LCD still will have more crisp text than this monitor can deliver. In some instances, it's significant, but what makes the clarity actually a lot worse is, let's address the elephant in the room. They are using a matte coating. Now, at first glance, a lot of people may say this is a semi-gloss coating, and it kind of does look like that. But as soon as you turn on the screen, you will see it is definitely very matte looking. It's very grainy. It's unfortunately going to blur the image pretty significantly, which is going to reduce some of that clarity of the 4K resolution. Don't get me wrong, it's still going to be far more clear than a 1440p one, but you are losing out on some of that clarity because of this matte coating. Now, they have chosen this to reduce the intensity of reflections, which for some of you out there may be very important, and maybe you will like this, but for me, yuck! No thanks, yucky. I do not want a matte coating on my display. I would not sand the front of my car windshield. Why would you do it to a monitor? You're looking through it to see the image. Same thing applies. And I think this was a horrendous choice by LG, and it does unfortunately impact the clarity as well as the contrast and the depth, whether it's in a light room or a dark room. There's no getting around it, and there's nothing you can do to fix it short of basically buffing out the display, which is unfortunate because it would look better if they'd chosen a glossy finish. And they do it on their TVs all the time. Their TVs have the best glossy coating in the business. They're super clear. They have excellent ambient light handling. I don't know why they don't use it here, but they're not. So just be aware, you're not going to get as much clarity as you will out of something like QD-OLED, which has its own issues, but it's much more clear. Now, in terms of the viewing angles, look, LG has some issues with viewing angles on white at an angle, but this is an 800R curved monitor. It curves like right around your face, basically. You're not going to have any issues with this. It's totally irrelevant. It's going to look amazing and super, super immersive. But you know what isn't immersive? The sound on this display. It comes with sound. I don't know if they're trying to advertise it, but if they are, they shouldn't, because oh boy, it is awful. Let's not even talk about it. Let's talk about, does this display have any other issues? Well, I have seen some reporting that they're having DisplayPort issues with RTX 50 series graphics cards, but I believe that's actually on Nvidia's end and should be fixed soon. And aside from some minor VRR flicker, which occurs on all OLEDs, there's really no issues, and the menu and firmware was really pretty decent overall as well. So there you have it. There is the 45GX 950A in all its ultra-wide 4K glory, and this is a very impressive monitor. And I gotta reiterate, this is without question the best ultra-wide monitor you can buy today. It has a super high resolution, it's super fast, it's super immersive with its 800R curve, and when games do properly support it, it is definitely, I'm gonna say, the most immersive monitor I have ever used in my life. And for those of you out there who that's what you're looking for, again, I'll have affiliate links in the description below. This is the monitor for you, but it's not perfect. In fact, it has quite a few problems that won't make it the perfect choice for everyone. To be specific, it has an absolutely horrendous coating. It is very grainy and looks very matte when the screen is actually on. And I do hope they change it to a glossy coating like their TV so they can get a massive improvement to the clarity as well as the contrast and depth of the image in the future. But hey, this is what you have to deal with right now. It also unfortunately has, I'd say, mediocre color in HDR, especially on highlights where this monitor is pushed to its limits, and does fall short of QD-OLED in that regard. And it does have a very high price as well as pretty mediocre HDR accuracy. Yet despite all those problems, again, because of all the great things that it brings to the table, I do think this is the best ultra-wide gaming monitor. And so for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and give this one, it could honestly, for some people, I could see this being a 10 out of 10. And for others, I could see this being something that maybe you're not so interested in. And for me, this is going to be a solid 7 out of 10 monitor. If they could address those issues, it could be a 9 or a 10 out of 10. But as it stands right now, this is still a very solid monitor and probably the most immersive one that money can buy today.